The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning hum. I sat still, my hands locked together in my lap, trying not to shake. My ex-husband leaned forward at the witness stand and with a calm, confident voice said, "She's jobless, homeless, and living off our child's school meals." The judge didn't flinch. He nodded, scribbled something into his notes, and kept his eyes on me like I was being measured. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself, but my throat locked up. My heart pounded in my chest so loud I could barely hear what came next. "And she takes pills," Caleb added. "She's unstable." He said it like it was a fact, like it was just another piece of paper he was handing over to the court. No emotion, no shame. He had convinced himself of this story so thoroughly it came out like gospel. I couldn't even breathe. I looked at the judge again, hoping for a reaction. Something. A flicker of doubt. But he just nodded once more and said, "Thank you, Mr. Ellison. You may step down." In that moment, I felt my whole world folding in on itself. All the nights I cried in silence so my son wouldn't hear. All the job applications I submitted with no answers. The afternoons spent in the school parking lot making peanut butter sandwiches in the car because I didn't have enough gas to drive home and back again. None of that mattered here. To them, I was just what Caleb said I was. Broken. Then I heard a small voice behind me, quiet but firm. "Mom, should I give him the letter from Dad's safe?" Every head turned. My son, Jace, stood up in the courtroom pew behind me, holding a folded envelope in both hands. His face was red, eyes wet but steady. He wasn't scared. He wasn't confused. He was standing up for me like he had more courage in that moment than I had in my entire body. The judge looked directly at him. "Who are you addressing, young man?" Jace answered without hesitating. "The judge. My mom didn't know about the letter, but I found it. It's about what my dad said, what he wrote. I think it's important." I froze. Caleb's eyes shot wide open. He stood halfway out of his seat and said, "Your Honor, he's just a child. He doesn't know what he's talking about." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Ellison." The bailiff approached Jace and gently took the letter from him. Jace looked at me and whispered, "It's okay, Mom." It was like time stopped. That moment, my son standing there choosing to speak when he didn't have to, changed everything. In an instant, the courtroom wasn't just a place where my life was being judged. It became the place where the truth finally had a voice. Before the judge even opened the envelope, I knew something had shifted. I didn't know what was inside. I didn't know what Caleb had written or what my son had found. But I knew this. Jace believed it mattered, and that meant something was finally about to change. 3 months before that courtroom, I was standing in my sister's laundry room, crying quietly into a pile of towels. Jace was watching cartoons in the living room, his backpack still on, homework untouched. I didn't want him to hear me fall apart again. That morning, I'd been rejected for the 6th job in a row. I had a master's degree, 5 years teaching experience, and not a single offer. One school told me they weren't sure I could handle the pressure. After seeing my medical leave history, I had taken 3 months off after the divorce to treat my anxiety. My doctor had prescribed medication and therapy, and for the first time in years, I was actually starting to feel like myself again. But once Caleb got wind of it, he turned my recovery into his weapon. The next day, I opened the mail and found a motion for full custody, filed by Caleb's lawyer. He had listed my unemployment, my temporary living situation with Talia, and my mental health treatment as evidence that I was an unfit parent. I dropped the envelope and just stared at it on the floor. Talia walked in and picked it up before I could even move. "What the hell is this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. I just looked at her. "He's trying to take Jace away from me." Talia didn't flinch. "Then we fight. We get a lawyer. We figure this out." But I didn't have money for a lawyer. Caleb knew that. He'd stopped paying child support 2 months earlier, claiming he needed time to adjust his finances. I tried calling, texting, even begging him to send something to help with groceries. He never responded. Jace never complained, though. He'd sit with me at the kitchen table while I scrolled through job boards and say things like, "It's okay, Mom, we're together. That's what matters." He had a way of saying it that made it sound like a promise. Like even if everything else fell apart, he'd stay standing next to me. At school, he was doing well. His teachers said he was quiet but focused. He always remembered to grab his free lunch ticket. He'd even bring home extra fruit or snacks and say, I thought you might want this, Mom. One night, he slipped a granola bar into my purse before I went to a job interview. I found it in the bathroom while I was washing my hands. I stood there looking at it, realizing my 8-year-old was trying to take care of me. I kept telling myself that the court would see the truth, that I was doing the best I could, that I wasn't perfect, but I was showing up every day. And not once had I put Jace in danger. Not once had I missed a parent-teacher conference or a bedtime story. But the court doesn't see bedtime stories. The day we went in for the first custody hearing, Caleb showed up in a tailored navy suit. His lawyer was a woman named Meredith Greer, sharp, polished, and cool. I felt like I was walking into a boardroom, not a courtroom. I wore a borrowed blazer and clutched a folder with receipts, job applications, school reports, and a note from my therapist stating that I was stable and actively managing my health. I thought that would be enough. I thought facts would matter. That morning, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Jace reached for my hand and said, "You're brave, Mom, even when you're scared." Talia had driven us. She gave me a hug at the courthouse steps, whispered, "Don't let him shake you," and then turned to Jace. "Look after your mom, buddy." He nodded, completely serious, like he knew this wasn't just about legal papers. This was about whether the world believed I was a good enough mother to deserve my child. Inside that courtroom, I sat across from a man who once swore he'd protect me. Now he was here to bury me in lies. But I held on to one thing, Jace. He was still mine, still next to me. And even if no one else believed in me, he did. I didn't know how far Caleb was willing to go. I didn't know what he would say or do. But I knew this. I wasn't going to give up. I just had no idea how bad it was about to get. The courtroom felt cold. Not physically, but in the way people looked at me. The way they looked through me, like I was just another failed mother trying to make excuses. I sat across from Caleb and he didn't even glance at me. He sat with his lawyer, Meredith Greer, flipping through a binder like this was a business transaction. I guess to him, it was. The judge, a gray-haired man named Judge Moreno, entered the room and adjusted his glasses. He looked like someone who had seen it all and stopped being surprised by anything. We stood. We sat. And then it began. Meredith rose first. She greeted the court with smooth professionalism, then launched directly into the narrative they'd built. "Your Honor, we're here today because Mr. Ellison has deep concerns for the well-being of his son, Jace. The child's mother, Ms. Maya Ellison, is currently unemployed, living in unstable housing, and unable to provide basic needs without relying on public school meal programs." I gripped the edge of the table. No one mentioned why I was unemployed. No one cared that I was in recovery from a mental health breakdown that Caleb had helped cause. All that mattered here was the image he painted. Meredith continued. "Furthermore, Ms. Ellison has a documented history of anxiety and has recently been prescribed mood stabilizers. While we respect mental health care, we believe that her current state is not conducive to full-time parenting of an 8-year-old child." She paused for effect, then added, "Mr. Ellison is fully employed, financially stable, and has a permanent residence with accommodations for Jace." The judge looked at me. "Ms. Ellison, do you dispute any of these facts?" I opened my folder, my hands shaking. "I'm not disputing that I'm between jobs, Your Honor, but I've applied to over 100 positions. I have teaching credentials, I'm not refusing to work, and I'm not unstable. I'm being treated by a licensed professional who confirms I'm healthy and fully capable of parenting." The judge nodded, but said nothing. I couldn't read him. Then Caleb stood. His voice was calm, practiced. "Your Honor, I want to make it clear that this is not about hurting Maya. I just want what's best for our son. She's trying, I know that. But trying isn't enough when our child's welfare is at stake." He turned slightly, glancing at me for the first time. "She's on medications she won't name. She sleeps at her sister's house, on a couch, while our son sleeps beside her. That's not stability." It was like a knife to the chest, the way he said it. Flat, casual, like my love for Jace didn't matter. Like my fight to keep him safe meant nothing because I didn't have a mortgage or a paycheck. I started to speak again, but the judge raised his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Ellison. Please sit." Talia, who sat in the back row, clenched her jaw. I didn't turn around, but I could feel her anger pulsing behind me. The judge looked back at me. Miss Ellison, do you have anything further? I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and demand that someone look at the full picture, that someone acknowledge how Caleb had delayed child support, refused to co-parent, and manipulated every legal process to make me appear reckless and irresponsible. But all I managed was, my son is safe with me. He's loved, he's cared for, and I will do everything in my power to provide for him. The judge jotted something down. His pen was steady. Mine felt like my life was being weighed by ink on paper. Then Caleb added one final blow. Your Honor, I found Jace once trying to clean up broken glass in the kitchen, alone, while Maya was in the bathroom for over an hour. He told me she was crying and wouldn't come out. That wasn't true, not even close, but I couldn't prove otherwise. He was using my healing against me, and no one stopped him. The judge leaned back in his chair. We'll take a short recess. I'll review the submitted documents and return with a preliminary custody recommendation. The gavel struck. I felt like the room tilted. My chest tightened. Jace sat behind me, still quiet, watching me with wide eyes. I had nothing left to say. I had said everything, and it hadn't mattered, until he stood up. Mom, Jace said, holding something in his hand. Should I give him the letter from Dad's safe? Everything stopped. The room didn't just fall silent. It stopped breathing. Mom, Jace said again, louder this time, standing up. His voice was steady, even as his hands trembled. Should I give him the letter from Dad's safe? For a second, I couldn't understand what he was talking about. A letter? From Caleb's safe? I turned toward him. He looked at me with those same brown eyes he had when he was born, full of quiet strength. He held out a folded piece of paper. It looked worn around the edges, like he'd opened and closed it a dozen times. Judge Moreno turned toward the voice. Who is this? He's my son, I said quickly. Jace Ellison. Caleb was already rising from his seat. Your Honor, he's just a child. He doesn't know what he's holding. It's probably nothing. Judge Moreno raised a hand. Mr. Ellison, sit down. Jace took a few small steps forward, still holding the paper. The bailiff walked over and gently accepted it from him. Caleb's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering rapidly. He didn't respond. He was staring at that paper, like it had a fuse sticking out of it. Judge Moreno unfolded it. He read it once, then again, slower. His expression didn't change much, but I saw the pause, the stillness. He took a deep breath and looked at me. Miss Ellison, he said, did you know about this letter? No, Your Honor, I said. I didn't know it existed. Your son claims it was found in Mr. Ellison's private safe. How would he have accessed that? I looked at Jace. It was in Dad's office, Jace said clearly. The safe was open. He left it open by mistake when he went out to the store. I was looking for my homework folder. I saw the envelope and my name was on the outside. I thought it was for me. That part hit me in the stomach. Caleb had written something with Jace's name on it, hidden it away and forgotten to lock it. Judge Moreno turned back to the letter and tapped it gently against the bench. This appears to be a handwritten note signed by Mr. Ellison, in which he discusses using the custody process strategically to avoid paying full child support. He refers to Ms. Ellison as easy to discredit due to her mental health history, and mentions creating a narrative that portrays her as emotionally unstable to strengthen his legal standing. Caleb shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Meredith leaned into him again, whispering something urgent. Mr. Ellison, the judge said, is this your handwriting? Caleb didn't answer. The judge repeated the question. He finally nodded. Yes, but it was never meant to be seen. I wrote it in frustration. It's not a formal statement. I understand, Judge Moreno said, but it is a documented admission of intent, and intent matters. This court does not tolerate manipulative conduct, especially when a child's well-being is at stake. Caleb opened his mouth to argue, but the judge continued. I'm placing this letter into the official record. We will adjourn for a brief recess while I assess its implications. The gavel struck again, but this time it didn't land like a hammer. It landed like the sound of something breaking open. I turned around to face Jace. He looked unsure, like maybe he had done something wrong. I knelt beside him and cupped his face in my hands. Where did you find it? I asked gently. "In the back of the drawer," he said. "I didn't think it was bad. I just thought it might help." "You did the right thing," I said, hugging him tightly. "You were brave." Talia came over and crouched beside us. She whispered, "Whatever's in that letter, it's got them rattled. That judge just changed. You saw it." I nodded, but I still felt like I was floating. After being beaten down for weeks, I wasn't used to something tipping in my favor. I was still waiting for the floor to fall out, but not Jace. He stood there, one hand in mine, the other clenched into a small fist by his side, like he had just protected the only thing that mattered in the world. He wasn't just my son. He was the reason I hadn't given up. And now, somehow, he had become the voice I didn't know I needed. As the judge stepped into his chambers, I realized something. We weren't finished, but for the first time, I wasn't walking into the next moment alone. My son had just put the truth into motion, and there was no stopping it now. The judge returned to the bench 20 minutes later. He looked different now, more alert, less neutral. He held the letter in his hand as if its weight had changed the gravity in the room. We all rose as he entered. The tension in the courtroom had shifted, and not just for me. Caleb looked visibly uneasy. He kept glancing at Meredith, who avoided his eye. I watched him roll his shoulders, pull at his cuffs, crack his knuckles. For a man who had walked into this room with total confidence, he now looked like he wanted to disappear. "Be seated," Judge Moreno said. We sat. "I have reviewed the letter submitted by the minor child, Jace Ellison. Its authenticity has not been disputed. It is signed by Mr. Caleb Ellison, dated 6 weeks prior to today's hearing, and contains troubling language regarding the use of the court to manipulate custody decisions for financial advantage." He looked directly at Caleb. "Mr. Ellison, this court considers any attempt to weaponize legal proceedings, particularly those involving the welfare of a child, as not only unethical, but dangerous. Your letter describes a deliberate effort to discredit the child's mother using personal medical history and financial instability as leverage. That is not advocacy. That is coercion." Caleb started to speak, but the judge didn't let him. "I have also reviewed statements made earlier in this hearing. The language used by Mr. Ellison and his counsel was framed to portray Ms. Ellison as incapable, despite a lack of substantive evidence indicating neglect or endangerment. In contrast, Ms. Ellison has provided documentation showing consistent caregiving, school involvement, and therapeutic compliance." I felt tears rising, but I held them back. I wasn't going to cry now. Not when the truth was finally being spoken out loud. "Furthermore," Judge Moreno continued, "this court acknowledges the courage demonstrated by the minor child in bringing forward evidence. While it is not this court's preference to involve children directly, in this case, his action was pivotal in uncovering misconduct." Then he turned to me. "Miss Ellison, I commend your restraint and perseverance. You have been placed under immense pressure, both emotionally and financially, and have continued to act in your child's best interest. The court recognizes that strength." I closed my eyes for a second. Just 1 second, enough to let that moment land. Then the judge turned back to Caleb. "As of today, sole physical and legal custody of Jace Ellison will remain with Ms. Maya Ellison. Mr. Ellison will be granted supervised visitation until further review. In addition, this court is referring your actions to family services and recommending an investigation into potential fraud, particularly regarding the manipulation of child support obligations." Caleb leaned forward, his voice sharp and defensive. "You can't be serious. That letter wasn't meant for anyone. I never acted on anything in it." Judge Moreno didn't flinch. "You committed perjury by omission. You misled the court under oath, Mr. Ellison. That letter may not have been intended for public view, but its existence and content speak to your character and intent. You are not the victim here." Meredith said nothing. She gathered her papers and stared straight ahead. The gavel came down, final and loud. "This hearing is adjourned." The room moved in slow motion. Talia exhaled hard behind me. The bailiff stepped toward Caleb, speaking quietly to him. I turned to Jace, who had been sitting quietly, clutching a small action figure in his hands. He looked up at me. "Is it over?" he asked. I knelt beside him and brushed a hand through his hair. "It's better," I said. "It's better now." We walked out of that courtroom together. I held his hand all the way down the hallway. Outside, the sun was warm, the air smelled like spring, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was failing. Caleb didn't follow us. He stayed inside, surrounded by lawyers and consequences. That moment, walking away, not as someone defeated, but as someone who survived, felt like a beginning, a chance to start again, on my terms. Jace squeezed my hand. "Can we get pancakes?" he asked. I smiled. "We absolutely can." And just like that, the future didn't feel so far away anymore. A month after the hearing, I got the keys to a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy. The walls were blank, the carpets worn, and the water pressure was inconsistent. But it was ours. There was a bedroom for me and one for Jace, and for the first time in almost a year, he had a real place to hang up his school drawings and line his books along the windowsill. He helped me move in, lugging boxes half his size, then immediately claimed the corner of his room near the closet as his thinking spot. That night, he asked if we could paint the walls. I told him, not yet, but soon. We were going to build something new, slowly, honestly, and together. Life didn't magically get easier. I still had to fight for every paycheck, still worked part-time hours at a tutoring center while picking up shifts at a local bookstore on weekends. But each morning, I woke up knowing my son was safe, happy, and sleeping peacefully in the next room. That was a kind of wealth I hadn't felt in years. Jace changed after the trial, not in a damaged way. He still laughed at cartoons and asked for syrup with everything. But something in him had matured. He spoke up more at school. He started asking questions about people's choices, about right and wrong, about why some adults lied. I answered him honestly, even when it was hard. "You were brave," I told him once as we folded laundry on the couch. He shrugged. "I didn't want them to think bad things about you. I knew Dad was lying." "You didn't just help me," I said. "You saved us." He didn't say anything after that, but he leaned into me and stayed there a long time. Caleb tried to appeal the judge's decision once, but it was denied. He still saw Jace once a week for 2 hours under supervision, but the power he had over my life was gone. He couldn't call and threaten to take custody. He couldn't cancel child support without consequence. He couldn't use my past as a weapon anymore. In the weeks that followed, I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped jumping every time the phone rang. I let go of the fear that I'd lose everything without warning. The court had given me custody, but Jace had given me back my voice. There was a time when I believed no one would ever see the truth. I thought all people saw was a woman who'd fallen apart. They didn't see how hard I fought to keep going, how much I loved my son. Deeply, I believed he deserved better than to be used as a pawn in someone else's game. What I learned is this. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one no one expects. Sometimes it's an 8-year-old boy holding a folded letter with both hands, standing in front of a courtroom full of adults and telling the truth. And sometimes the most important moment of your life doesn't come with warning. It walks in quietly through the voice of your child and turns the entire story around. People think survival is about strength, but it's not. It's about truth. It's about believing, even when everything says you're losing, that what you know in your heart still matters, that love is louder than lies, that your child's faith in you is reason enough to keep standing. I was once jobless, homeless, and called unstable in front of a judge, but I was also a mother, a fighter, and someone who refused to let the worst moment define the rest of my life. Now, every time I walk into our apartment, hear Jace humming in his room or pack his lunch for school, I feel it again, that quiet kind of victory. Not the loud kind you shout about, the kind you live in every single day. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like you were being judged by the worst chapter of your life, I hope this reminded you that truth has power, that healing is not weakness, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. If this story moved you in any way, please like the video. It helps more people hear stories that matter. Share it with someone who might need hope, who's been fighting their own quiet battle. And I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part hit home for you. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And if you want more real, raw, and honest stories about surviving, rebuilding, and rising, subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. No matter where you are or what you're going through, don't give up. The truth will always find its way to the surface. You are not alone.